All right, welcome back. Episode 2, Beyond the Red and Blues. Again, I'm Tyler. This is Zach. Today's episode, we're going to go over some pre-employment stuff. If you guys are interested in getting into law enforcement, at least at the local level, we'll talk a little bit about our experiences, what we went through, some stuff that we wish we knew, and before we were going through. But yeah, before and then during. So
Yeah, I
first
think
up, we
most of
have
it's
the hiring process. It's long. Okay, it doesn't matter which department, what state, anything like that. It's long. I think I applied March, and then I started academy in like October, and I think that's actually fairly quick. Mine was, so what's that, 8 months or so? I don't know about you.
mine was 11 months, so yeah, on the shorter side too.
Yeah, and I heard it can go much longer than that as well, depending on what your background is. I think your age will also depend on, like, if you're a 21-year-old, like, yeah, I went to high school and then, college for 2 years. That's it.
Right.
Like, the background's nice and short. But if you're like in your 30s, you've held multiple jobs, managerial positions, so on, I think that can really add up.
Yeah, it definitely does. Part of the process, I guess we're going to touch on kind of the core basics that should apply to most departments, if you will, kind of the general categories of all of them, and some tips that shouldn't have to be said, but obviously they have to be addressed. So one of them that we'll cover is dress for the job. So you're looking at starting your career, whether you're 20 or older, it doesn't really matter. You're looking at a career in law enforcement. You're an adult now, so dress for the job. A lot of people go in shorts and flip-flops and Hawaiian shirts and some of the wildest things. So even if you can't afford something like a nice suit, get a polo, get some slacks, and at least somewhat look professional.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand what some people wear. Is this like I don't know, a part-time summer gig that, you don't really care that much about, or is this going to be a career? And there's a huge
Right.
difference there. I think it should be a suit mandatory, maybe no tie, for the men, maybe. I think you still should be going, looking your best. I think it shows that you care, but for some reason, some people still, dress like business casual or even worse.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing is clean up your social media. Your online presence, especially nowadays, is more and more predominant, and people have all sorts of platforms and stuff. Make sure that your social media reflects, again, somewhat professional. Maybe have it on private, protect your image, but at the same time, you have to make sure that uh, if you are going to have an online presence, that it's appropriate for the job that you're looking to do.
Right. And if you think they're not going to look at that, you're wrong. Because I remember that being one of the things, they slide the paper across and they're like, okay, give me all your handles, your usernames, everything. We're going to look you up. And we're going to see what kind of stuff you're watching, you're retweeting, posting, and so on. So honestly, if you're not like a big social media person, I would almost recommend just to delete it outright or minimize it to maybe 1 or 2 accounts. But, that's totally up to you. You'll have to make that decision for yourself of what's on there. I've heard of people even, I can't really verify this, but I heard there was like a teenager who posted a picture, like with a beer bottle, like, haha, like funny. And that ended up costing them the job.
Yeah, I could see
That
that.
was from like a friend of a friend. I heard that. But so stuff like that, like stuff that maybe you don't think is a big deal could be, because you don't really know what they're looking for. And the background
Right.
investigators, that's all they do. That's their 40-hour week or even more. They're just looking into you, and their job is to find a reason for their organization to not hire you. They're not looking for reasons why. That's the interview. That's the written exam. That's the fitness test. They're looking for any disqualifier.
Right. And the more you have, the more they are going to scrub through. So give them less, right? And all those posts matter, and they do see all this, and they see your interactions, and they see every little thing. Like you said, this is their job. So they're going to sit there and they're going to scrutinize every single thing that you like and post and so on and so forth. So minimize your presence as much as possible, or make it private, or like you said, delete it if that's the case. But I think obviously reflecting who you are in the interview needs to match your social media. So make everything consistent so that way you have your best shot.
Yeah, for sure. And I touched upon the I think for most departments, the written test is first. I don't really know if there's too many pointers we can give you on that. I think there are some study guides out there. I don't remember if I studied all that much for mine. Um, yeah, I can't. Do you remember? I really don't remember too much about it.
No, I really don't remember doing much on the written. It probably was not that relevant.
Yeah, I don't remember being like particularly hard, or I was really racking my brain on stuff. But if you're nervous, there are some study guides out there, and some of them are even organization specific. Like for some bigger
Hmm.
ones, I've seen that. But if you're like a smaller department, probably not going to have that kind of.
Yeah. Next, I think you kind of touched on physical activity. So you're going to run a lot. The physical fitness tests change for every organization, of course, but the core of them are typically going to include running, push-ups, pull-ups, some sort of drag and carry of a dummy or a sandbag, and usually like a wall jump. So prepare mostly for either some sort of obstacle course, but it's going to be a lot of cardio and a lot of push-ups even going into the academy. So your best bet is probably just at least start practicing those things.
Yeah, I remember saying in the first episode too, what I always tell people when they ask me, like, how hard is it or how should I train? You can't be too in shape. They're not going to be mad at you that you can run a 6 minute mile. Like
Yeah,
maybe you got to pull back to 8 minute mile because that's the pace, but you run a six. Okay, that's one less thing you got to worry about. But if you're at
right.
like a 10 minute pace and you're at the back of the pack and now you're failing PT tests, that could be an issue. So that's just one more thing you have to worry about. Just get out there and run, do the push-ups. Doing 100 push-ups, nobody's going to blame you for that. It's only going to look
Hmm.
better, and they're going to find someone else to pick on too. Because if you're at the back of the pack for like running, that's where the DIs or whatever you're going to call them, but they hang out in the back there and they see who's the slowest runner, and they'll
Right.
come and get you.
Yeah, and I mean, at least once you're in the academy, you're there. But for pre-employment, like most of these are pass or fail. So if you can't do the bare minimum on your push-ups and pull-ups and mile and a half and so on and so forth, then you just may not even get a job offer to begin with. So at the bare minimum, you should be finding those requirements online, and most of the organizations have them posted, and at least meet those minimum requirements. But like you said, go above and beyond. You're gonna do tenfold in the academy. So okay. In terms of your process, whether it's your physical fitness test or you get scheduled for the polygraph or any part of this, the process is already really long. And what extends it for a lot of people sometimes are delays. So, getting time off of work or finding daycare for your kids or getting whatever arrangement you need to make a medical appointment or a PT test or whatever it may be, sometimes it's difficult. But if you miss it, a lot of the times you're going to extend your process by a month or two. So find ways to make sure that you are not the reason for these delays so that way you're always on top of it. Sometimes it's hard and it's hard to accommodate, especially if you're working or have kids and even in college for some of the younger guys. But you have to find ways to accommodate because you don't want to run into these delays. Like we've already talked about, 8 months is fast compared to most. So there are some people that take years to get through this.
Yeah, and if you can't make, I don't know, say, like for example, we had to do an interview with our background investigator, and they kind of just give you the quick down and dirty. Here's what I'm gonna look at. Here's how long it usually takes, and so on. If you can't make that appointment, um, if you can't reschedule stuff in your life to make that appointment, this is not the career for you. Okay, because you're going to be working weekends, you're going to be working night shift, you're going to be working holidays. You are going to be constantly rescheduling and moving your life, personal life around your work life. So if you can't do one appointment, in a month, this isn't going to work. And your family needs to be ready for that too, because this is very difficult, especially when you go straight to patrol. You're at the bottom of the barrel. You have no seniority. You're going to be doing Christmas morning. You're going to be doing Thanksgiving. I remember I worked 16 hours for my first 4th of July. So it's going to be tough. It is going to be taxing for sure. And your family, if you have one, has to be ready for it.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of disqualifications, again, every organization is a little different, but look into what are automatic disqualifiers. A lot of them are going to include most of the violent crimes or even domestic violence. Um, and when you go and you are asked these questions. Obviously, be honest, but when I was applying, I remember sitting outside of the office to go next. And one of the questions that they ask is, have you ever used drugs? And the person inside, I heard him say yes. And marijuana was not legal at the time. And so he admitted to that, which isn't probably the biggest deal. And then on the next thing, they asked if he's ever sold drugs. And he said yes, and that he sold marijuana through most of high school. That's probably going to be an automatic disqualifier. So things like that, thank you for your honesty, but probably not going to work. Find all these disqualifiers online so that way you don't waste your time, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, every department's going to have something different, their standards. I've heard of some even with hard drugs, cocaine or crack. It has to be like no more than 8 years ago or something. They're
Right.
really starting to get lax on stuff. But it totally depends. We're talking about LA and California is our expertise. I'm sure a
Right.
more red state probably won't have that kind of leniency to it.
Right. Right.
But yeah, not everything is automatic disqualifier though. Some things people think like, oh, I'm not even gonna bother because
Hmm.
it's never gonna work. I have a tattoo or something, or a tattoo is visible on my arm. I don't know, whatever it is.
Right.
It's not always a disqualifier, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, and most of these organizations, it's all on the hiring process or whenever you apply. So it's very accessible. You can find these things. And tattoos are one of those things, yeah, I think a lot of people could be deterred by, but it's very, very accepting nowadays. And even if it's not, like our agency allows you to still work with tattoos, you just have to cover them. So there's always ways around it for certain things. Next, I think we cover just stay up to date on your health. And that covers pretty much anything from just your general health to your eyes. For me, one thing that put me back 2 months, which may have put me more in line with his like 8 month process. I was wearing glasses that didn't allow me to see 20/20, and I hadn't even realized. So when I went in, they tested your vision, and I didn't pass. So I had to go get new glasses, a new prescription, and then wait and retest. So that delayed me by quite a bit. So just staying on top of like your general health, and simple things like contacts, glasses, things like that can go a long way.
Yeah, I know for me, I got delayed 2 months as well. So I guess you could say mine would have been 6 months, which is actually really, really quick. But I remember on the medical, which is like one of the last things that I went through, was they asked me, have you ever had razor burn? Because for men, we have to shave daily. I remember I said yes. And so they said, okay, well, we can't hire you for this date. The next academy class will be in 2 months, and we need you to take pictures, shave every day for I think it was like 2 weeks. Send us pictures, and the physician will either approve or deny your academy and hiring, like outright. So like, oh wow, okay. So I did that. I passed, obviously, but I remember I was talking to someone about it, and they said, well, how do you know that you had razor burn? I said, well, it got a little bit red a couple of times. I saw that. And he said, well, did you ever like go to a doctor? I said, no. And he said, were you ever diagnosed? I said, no. He said, well, then how do you know you even had it? I said, oh man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's
So I
true.
may have shot myself in the foot there. I didn't even realize what I was doing. I was almost divulging information that I didn't even know was true. So
Right.
another tip that I wish I had known beforehand.
Yeah, I think obviously we all want to be as truthful as can be, and sometimes we read into things way more than we should. So, and that kind of leads us into the polygraph. So, with the polygraph, kind of the same thing. There's really no tips or tricks on how to beat it or get around it. Obviously, you're going to have to sit down and you're going to have to answer all the questions, and it's all going to have to be as truthful as you can. One way that it was explained to me is at the time I was working fast food. And so he explained it to me that a polygraph is kind of like making a hamburger. It's like you have your bun and you have your patty and cheese and lettuce and tomatoes. And he said, each element of this polygraph, whether it's the various sensors on you, whether it's me reading your body language or your amount of sweat, things like that, each one of those is kind of like an element of this burger. And once we take the whole picture and put it all together, then we're able to have a final product. So each question is kind of answered, and each one is looked at through all these various points. And determined whether or not to be true or false. It's not as simple as, well, I'm nervous, so I'm probably going to fail. Everyone is nervous. I think that's probably the most common thing and something that they see a lot, but it's all of a combination of everything else that goes along with those nerves that probably indicates to them that someone is not being truthful. So just be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get nervous. Well, I mean, you could almost say everyone gets nervous,
Yeah,
at least a little bit,
of
because
course.
it's towards the back half, maybe even like, you're 3/4 of the way through, you're getting close to getting hired. They start talking about possible academy dates coming up. You're starting to get into it and you're like, oh man, but that one skeleton in my closet, is it going to jam me up? And
Right.
they get nervous, and they end up either saying something they shouldn't have, or the wrong way, or whatever, and they can get it inconclusive, and they have to go retest. But yeah, just relax, answer truthfully, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yep. Yeah.
If you try and lie and you get caught, forget it. And then not only are you not going to get hired with that department, you're probably going to get xed out of pretty much everybody, because they pull
Yeah.
that stuff. Other organizations will pull, and they'll look and
Definitely.
see that they either detected that you were trying to be evasive or just flat out lying, and they say, nope, forget it. Because when it comes time for court, I think they can pull that too.
Yeah.
And that's why it's an automatic disqualifier if you get caught lying, because you can't testify.
Yep. One other thing that you kind of reminded me of here, if you for some reason get disqualified or pull your application or whatever the case may be, that you don't get through, it is a really, really good idea to retain a copy of everything that you submitted, all the basic personal info and questions that you've answered, because when you do go back and reapply, whether it's for another agency or for the same, they're usually going to look at those documents that you initially submitted and look for inconsistencies. So if you're trying to game it after the fact to pass now, then they'll find those and catch those. And that's probably going to lead to another disqualification or to more questions on your polygraph that may catch you in a lie too. So retain all that stuff. Things sometimes just change, or you just forget certain things. And so it could be innocent, but it's obviously better if you just have all that, so that way there's no inconsistencies and you can just double check your work.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to all right, so you've made it, right? You got your academy date, day one.
Congrats.
Yeah, congrats. What are some things you should know about that? What to expect? Yeah, there's going to be a lot of physical activity. There's no doubt about that. You're going to run a lot of push-ups, even sit-ups, pull-ups. I mean, just physically demanding stuff. You're going to be doing a lot of it.
Yep.
I remember carrying bags over your heads or whatever, so keep going with your fitness. I'm telling you, you can't be too in shape. It's only going to help you.
Yeah, I think on top of that, it's a lot of things that people don't expect. So you're going to be lifting more than you think, a lot more running and a lot more push-ups than you think. Pull-ups were a strong or a thing that most people were unable to do or really, really struggled to do. So yeah, get on top of all those real core basics. You're probably going to run anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week. And for us, I mean, it was 6.5 miles a session. And then that's not even including all the rest of the physical activity throughout the day. So you're constantly getting in trouble. You're constantly making mistakes. You're constantly doing things to merit push-ups. And so you're doing a lot of push-ups just on top of your dedicated physical fitness time. So just be prepared for that. You are doing a lot of movement, even if it's slow movement, like just marching. All that adds up to where you are exhausted very, very quickly throughout the day.
Oh yeah, for sure. Don't forget to rest. I mean, seriously, that's huge, especially on your on your weekends. I know there's 2 types of academies. One are commuter academies, like we did. You just go there for the day. I mean, it's a long day, don't get me wrong, but you're only there for the day. You get to go home and sleep in your own bed at night. And there are other ones that are more live-in academies. Like you show up on Monday and you get dismissed on Friday. And we can't really talk to those, but I do know, or I've heard, I have friends that have done it. And they're going to look at stuff like, how clean is your room? Are your socks oriented a certain way in your drawers? Is your bed made to a certain standard? That kind of stuff. So there's a lot more of that, which we didn't have to do. And I was happy that I didn't have to do it again.
Yeah, I agree. But all that is just attention to detail, right? Like, can you have attention to detail on these really small menial tasks that probably no one is going to pay attention to, or that they may not check every single day, but do you do it every day? So for us, like, we had the community, which is great, but there's still plenty of trials where they get you on the same attention to detail tasks. So you're going to, whether you live there or not, you're going to still kind of have a similar experience.
Yeah, and the beds reminded me of. I just want to talk to any military members looking to make that transition. So I went through Army basic training about, geez, almost 15 years ago now. But there's a lot of similarities. The police academy is more paramilitary, so you're going to run, but not as much. You're going to do push-ups, but not as much. They're going to yell at you and get in your face, but not as much. And that's kind of the trend that I noticed. Other things that were similar, there's a lot of drill and ceremony, marching and stuff like that. I remember we would raise the flag in the morning and also lower it in the afternoon, but that was reserved only for military recruits. The normal civilians weren't allowed to do that. So it was kind of a nice little thing for us. Some other things that would be similar, I don't know. You've already been through it. You know they're going to try and put you under stress, break you down, try and build you back up kind of thing. You've already been through it. The academy is going to feel very familiar. I'll put it that way. A lot of things are very similar. Some stuff that's different, it's going to be a lot more education based. There's a lot of classroom time, way more than the Army put you through. I remember having some PowerPoints and presentations, especially on like some first aid or land nav stuff. The academy's not going to have that. It's going to be way more. Well, for us, it's penal codes, but it could be state statutes wherever you're from. It's going to be a lot more focused on learning the laws and the crime elements to see if the elements of the crime have been met, and you're going to be tested on that, and you're going to have to pass it. Another thing, and this is one of the bigger ones that I noticed. In the Army, I remember saying a lot of, like, if something goes wrong, well, Staff Sergeant, whoever is the one who told me to do this. So, sorry, take it up with them. If you don't want me to do it, then, you outrank them and I'll stop. But this is why I did it. As a recruit and you're going to be a police officer, that's not the case. You are held to like an individual standard. You have to answer for your actions. There is no, oh, he told me to or she told me to. That's not going to fly. You're going to end up either fired or even arrested. It's a very different ball game as a police officer compared to the military.
Yeah.
And I think those are really some of the bigger ones. You're also going to have to, let me think. I think we started with 100 total in my class, and I think maybe like 14 were military previously, maybe 15. I want to say somewhere around there. Yeah. I remember we kind of we stuck together because we had been through it, and you have to teach these now civilians, like some of them are waitresses, or Zach worked at Carl's Jr. You kind of have to teach them what these people are going to be looking for, how they're going to yell into your face. Don't let them rattle you. That's their whole goal. And kind of like bring up to speed on the expectations. So you're almost kind of mentoring the rest of the class a little bit. So I think that's all I have for military, though.
Yeah, and I think my class was about the same. It was probably in that 10 to 15 range, and we really did look to a lot of those guys for guidance. And if it wasn't like on a personal level where we spoke to them and they kind of mentored us one-on-one, we just looked at them as examples. And that was from anything from just like how they dressed. Their uniforms were always very sharp. They always marched just a little bit better. They always handled the stress a little bit better. Their shooting was always just a little bit better. And so like you look at these guys and they really were, for the most part, all really good examples. And even if we didn't talk to them regularly, in that sense, we still looked up to them and they still mentored us that way. So it's definitely an advantage, it seems, to kind of come from that background because I had never been exposed to a lot of these things. So like one thing is the stress, right? And their goal is to break you down and try to build you back up. And I had never experienced something like that. So, you can watch videos and you can see it online and you can kind of hear the stories, but it's different when someone's in your face, and how you respond to that is different for everyone. And so you'll figure out real quickly, like, can you handle it, or do you crack under pressure? And I don't mean crack like you're going to break down crying, but some people like laugh and some people cry and some people can just stay stoic. And so you kind of figure out like, what kind of person are you in that sense, you know? And so the stress is, it's going to be big, and they're relentless. They just don't give up for the 6 months, whether you are kind of squared away or not, they're on you. So
Yeah, I definitely seen some men cry, just same as basic. I seen him cry there. I saw him cry at Police Academy. I think we had like 5 or 6 quit day one.
yep.
They just realized, yeah, this is not for me. This is not what I thought I was signing up for, and they just walk. And you can do that. I guess that'd be a difference from the military. There's no contract. You're not signed up. I mean, I guess you can separate during basic, under other or whatever it is. I forget they discharge you under, but it's much quicker because you can just leave. You can just walk away and just go home.
Just quit
drive
that day.
20 minutes home and you're done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just don't let them get to you. Which reminds me, let's get into what people fail the most on. I think maybe that some of our viewers might be interested in that. Like, what are the things that, of those who don't make it, is there anything in particular that gets them?
Yeah. I think for my class, the majority of the people, we were probably about the same, started around 100. We graduated somewhere around 70, give or take. And some people just outright quit. But I would say the most that failed for us were shooting and scenarios. So shooting, again, same thing, had almost no experience in this. And so you have to come in and you have to build that foundation real quick, and then you're tested. So you have to learn how to shoot. Then you have to learn how to shoot in all these different various positions. And for us, and obviously every state's a little different, but you do it out in a dirt range, out in the desert, and it's hot, and it adds to a degree of difficulty, So I had to really learn how to shoot from nothing. And a lot of people, I think, were in that same position. So if that's the case, if you can start shooting now, even if it's just simple at the range, just learning to overcome that like anticipation of pulling the trigger and the fear behind it, and just starting to break some of these like, emotional aspects to the shooting, I think will go a long way. And then you can get your form down and all that refined once you actually get into the academy. But for a lot of people, just the anticipation, they're scared almost to pull that trigger because they know it's going to go boom. And so they try to help you overcome it. There's drills and stuff that they do, but you can tell a lot of people have never been around that. And so there's some intimidation to it. I'll let you touch on shooting, and then I'll go into scenarios after that if you have anything on shooting.
Yeah, I think for my class, shooting was that may have been number one. I think we probably lost. Well, yeah, we started 100. I think we had 74 graduate was the number, something like that. I want to say like eight or nine. It was just shooting alone, which is, a third.
Yeah.
And that's quite a bit. I came from, were you one of the people that never shot a gun ever prior to the academy?
Yeah, I had never shot a gun.
Okay. So I came from a very different background. I grew up, just plinking out in the backyard, my BB gun as like a young teen. And then I moved into competition shooting in high school. I did it all 4 years. After that, I went into military, obviously, for several years. So I had a whole bunch of background in shooting. It was really no problem for me. It was my favorite days. I loved it. Any day that they're going to pay me to shoot their ammo. I mean, come on. That was pretty awesome. But the scenarios you mentioned, and that's something that's definitely different from military scenarios. What they'll do is they will, they'll make a scenario, and whatever it is, say it's a domestic violence or something, and they'll give you a little bit of information saying, 911 caller said they heard banging on the walls of their apartment. They're concerned because they heard the female yelling help, and so they just want law enforcement to go check it out. And that's the information you have. And so you got to go knock on the door and figure out what happened. Did a crime occur? I talked about those crime elements. You have to have that in your head. What are the elements of the crimes? And determine if a crime occurred. Does somebody have to go to jail? Who? Sometimes it's both in a domestic. I've had that in real life. Only like once or twice. Really rare, but it does happen. So scenarios are difficult because there's a lot of stuff going on in your head. It moves quickly, and you need to make the right decision. If you're going to arrest someone and they haven't committed a crime, that's a huge deal. And I remember there was one time someone, this was when I was actually working patrol, someone had arrested somebody for drunk in public in their own home.
That's
And
not good.
I mean, even you guys watching this right now, you can understand drunk in public. I mean, that's the crime, or public
Right.
intoxication, however it be written, in your state. Uh, you have to be intoxicated in public. So in your own home, the elements are not met. It's legal to get drunk in your own home. So yeah, Sergeant had a field day with that one, and so did LT. Uh, you got to know that stuff because you just kidnapped someone essentially and took away their civil liberties, and you made the mistake, and now you're going to have to eat it.
Right. Yeah, and the scenarios are just that. It's just a test to see how well you can do on the fly. Can you process all this information of how to interview and how to show proper officer safety, make a decision on whether or not that a crime has been committed, and it goes into everything, whether or not you even have the legal means to detain them initially, to search them, to pat them down for weapons, whatever it may be. It's a test to see, after all this classroom knowledge, can you go apply it in the field? And what you'll find is a lot of people are very quickly intimidated because there's not a high level of cooperation because they're instructors and obviously they're trying to make it difficult for you. And so the way people talk to you is going to be difficult, and the way they cooperate, they may not want to turn around. They may not want
Or
to
not at
follow your
all. Yeah, I was
commands.
about to say.
Right. And so now when we were doing drills in the classroom, everybody turned around and everybody would let you handcuff them and everybody was okay with you searching them. And now we get into these scenarios and all of a sudden there's that little bit of challenge, and you kind of see how quickly people are scared of that opposition, and can they still act? And obviously this goes back to stress, but can they still act under that stress? And so a lot of people fail, or they maybe kind of muscle through it, and you get to a search and that search is no longer proper because in the classroom, again, there was no resistance, so you went through it real smooth. But then now there's a little bit of resistance and maybe you start forgetting things, so you didn't check the waistband right, or you didn't check the sock and there was a gun tucked in there, or who knows. So that little bit of opposition really does throw people off a lot, and it's very important that you get that down because in the field, a lot of people don't want to be searched and they don't want to be touched and they don't even want to deal with you. So how are you going to overcome that? And some of it is knowledge. You have to know what you can do, and you have to know what you can do right now.
Dude, that
And
is
some of it is
huge.
just
So
right.
huge to know what you
And
can and can't.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, that's the difference between a good arrest and you're getting jammed up.
right.
Bad. I mean, you could even go to the point where you get arrested if you really
Yeah.
mess it up.
Yeah. So all these things are important. The scenarios kind of put everything together, like the knowledge and everything. It all combines to allow you to show this as a real world application. And what you'll find is a lot of people fail them. And obviously, there's a degree that they allow for error, but a lot of people really struggle to apply everything, or they just didn't pay attention on certain aspects. And so now they're trying to muscle through it, but it's just you. Your partner may be there, but it's usually an instructor, and they're not going to guide you or give you tips. They're just going to ask you what you want to do, and they're just going to do it, whether it's legal or not. And then they'll debrief after the fact that, hey, you couldn't have done any of these things because it's not right. And so in those scenarios, you'll find a lot of people fail. So take the time, practice. They give you a whole lot of time throughout at least in our academy, where they kind of let you know, like, you're going to have scenarios on all these various things. Start practicing, practice your searching, your handcuffing, read your crime elements and so on and so forth. So for us, at least in my academy, we had like groups on the weekends where we would take a day or a couple hours and we would go over like mock scenarios, and we would make it difficult on each other. So you'll find in the academy a lot of the time it's like I said, we'll just go along with the program because we're trying to be nice to each other. But once you start building these relationships with your fellow recruits, you can kind of play that role that the DI would in terms of like be a little difficult, maybe wiggle a little bit, right? Don't allow them to handcuff, whatever it is. Nothing crazy, but just that little bit to throw you off from that routine. So that way you don't just go through the motion.
Yeah, and this stuff carries way beyond the academy too. I remember you get some trainees in the field. I'm sure you've had similar, but I remember one day I was working with this trainee and we were going over robberies. And I was just asking, what's the elements? And one of them, and at least in California, it has to be in the immediate presence of the victim. And I'm sure other states are very similar, or it's written similarly. And so I asked him, well, what is that? What exactly, how much space are we talking? I said, if you're on one side of the hood of the car, because remember we were using the patrol car. If you're on this side of the hood, I'm on the other. Does that count? And he had kind of thought about it. I was like, okay, well, what if you're 3 car lengths away? Does that count? What if you're a football field, 100 yards? What if you're, half a mile? How far is it? Because the words just say immediate presence. Well, but there's no numbers. So you got to go look it up. And you got to figure out exactly how far that is, because you need to know what crime you have. And that comes really important later on. That's maybe a little bit more advanced than academy level, but just to show you that the stuff you learn in the academy, you will build on it later.
Yeah. And a lot of that can even start in the academy where you're just asking questions. Like, don't read something just to read it and then try to just memorize the definition or just memorize the element as immediate present. Ask what this stuff means. A lot of these instructors can explain it, and there is going to be a lot of that look it up, but maybe they can kind of guide you in the right direction. So there's a case law that it pertains to, or policy or something, and maybe you can find it that way quite easily. But it is worth looking into and starting that now. Start questioning things and start figuring out what these words mean, because the penal code and the law in general is really, really complicated, and the words are not really easy to understand. And so you have to really try to look into these things and break them down so that way you can understand it and then apply this when you go out and you start asking these people, because you're probably not going to ask them, was it in your immediate presence? You're probably going to ask them, like, was it in your hand? Was it in your pocket? Was it on the hood of the car next to you? And so you're going to try to apply your questioning to this element based on your knowledge of it. So, you're not going to go out and just ask them the elements. You have to figure out how to interview. And obviously that comes in the academy too, but that's a whole art within itself.
Yeah. And these things happen very quickly sometimes, especially if it's a violent felony.
Yeah.
You need to be able to figure that stuff out quickly to determine what crime you have in 30 seconds or less, sometimes, even less than that sometimes. And then you have to let your partners know, what do we have? What are we working with? Sometimes it's nothing. And then sometimes it's a true violent felony crime that, they'll let you, pursue till the gas runs out in your car. So you need to know. And your partners need to know too, because if they're going to go do something, they're going to handle it at a certain level, depending on what the crime is, or if there's no crime at all.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think we can cover report writing and then maybe support systems after.
Yeah. Oh, and just one other thing. You're going to get pepper sprayed. I think people know that. Taser was optional for us. You don't have to do that. You will have to shoot it though, but not actually get hit by it. And tear gas was mandatory for us, at least. None of those are particularly fun. I didn't really that wasn't my favorite day going to do that stuff, but you'll have to get exposed to it. So that way, when you use it on someone, what exactly they're feeling, how bad is it? Because sometimes I've had people exaggerate to like the nth degree about either pepper spray or gas. And I can tell they don't have that much on their face, or it's on their arm and they're crying bloody murder. But I know it's not that bad. And so that's important for you to know what they're going through.
Yeah. For things that are optional too, I'll just say with the taser, it was optional to us, and obviously nobody wants to go through it. What I was told is kind of the same thing, though. It is good that you experience it firsthand, so that way you know the effects, and also so you know how to recognize them. You know what this person is going through, and now when you testify in court, even then you can say that this was the desired effect, and that you are aware of how it should look, both utilizing it and both receiving. So it is good, as much as it sucks to go through some of these. It's worth it one time.
Yeah, I think at least once. As much as it sucks, it's worth it. You mentioned report writing. You're definitely going to be doing at least a little bit of that in the academy. They'll go over basic crime reports. They'll grade it and kind of give you some feedback. You don't really start digging into that until I think you get to patrol, and your
Yeah.
training officer will go over and they'll go line by line, word by word with you and make sure it's all right. Because guess what? It all goes to the district attorney or the prosecutor, and you might have to testify to that. And for your own sake, it better be squared away because the defense will read it as well, and they're going to grill you on it if there's anything missing or you maybe not necessarily misspelled something, but they're going to look and they're going to make sure they're going to try and find any hole they can in your report.
Yeah, definitely. And you're just going to learn the very, very, very basics of report writing and the structure and kind of what goes into it, how to utilize all that law language into a report and the elements to an arrest and things like that. Try to do the best you can to pick up on it. You're definitely going to get way, way, way more advanced in patrol. And even in custody, you start touching on them if you work a place that makes you go to jails first. But for the most part, you'll touch on that later. But you do learn the core. Try to learn what you can. Like I talked about in episode 1, it's one of those things that a lot of people struggle with. So whatever help you can get, even if it's just, practicing a bunch in the academy, it does help.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think our last topic here, we got a support system, which is
Yep.
your family, if you have a spouse, kids. I didn't have any of that going through. I don't think Zach did either. We're just single guys, maybe girlfriends or something. But they need to know, whoever it is, it's going to be really long hours. I remember my alarm clock went off, I think, like 3:10 or 3:15 in the morning. And then I was home, I want to say just before 6, or maybe, yeah, somewhere around there. It's
Yeah.
long days. And then you get home, you're so wiped out. You just shovel some food in, shower, and then you get your stuff ready in the morning for the next day. And then I was in bed by like 8:30 or 8
Oh, easily. You're so
because
tired.
not only are you tired, but even if you're going to bed at 8 and I was up at just after 3, that's only 7 hours.
Yeah.
That's not really enough. So make sure you're like I said before, rest on the weekends, sleep in, whatever you got to do, because it's going to be a long 5 or 6 months, whatever it is. It's tiring, and make sure everyone's ready for it. You're going to be gone long days, and if you have kids, especially, that's going to be really tough.
Yeah, whatever help you can get goes a long way. And even, my parents would help me every now and then just pack a lunch, or you're going to have to shine your gear and pack your gear every night. And for us, we had to write standards sometimes. So, like, it isn't just go home and relax or even just go home and study sometimes. Sometimes you go home with homework. And so now you have to get it done the next day. So you're going home, you're still doing everything else that needs to get done and that. So if you have responsibilities at home, like, a spouse or kids or anything like that, prepare them, let them know, like, for the next 6 months or however long your academy is, it's going to be really long days and it's going to be really hard. And you are going to need a lot of help because you're going to go home and be real irritable and real tired. And you're not going to want to do all those basic things that, you may just be doing now routinely. So prepare them in that sense. It's easier for sure if you have people around you to help you through it, because it's really hard. And it just comes down to that, is you're already stressed out all day and you can't be stressed out at home too.
Yeah, and I think if you don't have the correct support system, I almost want to say you won't make it.
Yeah.
If your family home life is not ready, it just makes it so much harder. I don't know if you'll be able to do it. And like I said before too, this is not an easy. This is not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Banking hours.
Yeah.
We, I mean, no, we worked 9 to 5 at night. You know, on Saturday night, Friday night, Sunday night. So your family's got to get ready for 20, 30 years of this. It's not going to go away. You're going to be working 16-hour shifts or 12s, depending on the department. No matter what, the schedule is about as bad as it can get. I remember talking to one of my friends. I said, well, if they were going to try and make my schedule worse, how would they do it? I said, I don't know. There's really nothing left.
Right.
They got me. This is about as bad as it gets. So,
Yeah.
yeah, your family's got to be ready for sure.
Yeah, you really don't get weekends or holidays off, especially as the new guy. You're going to be working probably every holiday for your first few years. You're probably going to be on the worst shift, on overnights, and your days off usually are not ideal. You're going to get a Tuesday and a Thursday, or Tuesday and a Wednesday, and you know, it takes a long time to rotate to a better schedule or to get to a position that has weekends or holidays or any of that off. Prepare, even if it's not, he said 30 years, you got to realize a lot of the times when you promote, you start over. So, even if you go to, homicide detective or all these other different various spots, you're the new guy again. And so you're probably going to get the worst schedule there. So even when you move up and on, like, you're still going to go back to kind of these not ideal schedules. So I just prepare for that. A lot of the holidays that, I have, and now with my wife and our family, and a lot of it is done on a different day. So if, it falls on a Thursday and I have a Friday off, we're probably just going to have to celebrate that on a Friday, So it's kind of that flexibility where they have to have that understanding of this is unfortunately how it's probably going to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know a lot of guys, they'll do 5, 6, 7 years. They finally get a good schedule, and that's it. They don't want to move. They don't want to promote. They don't want a new spot. They finally get like a Monday to Friday spot, like say like a school resource officer or something, and they're in charge of 5 elementary schools.
Right.
Well, that's pretty nice with schools because you're working day shift. If there's a federal holiday, the school's off. That means you're off, and so on. And they don't want to move. And I get it, especially if you got young kids. That's going to be tough. You're going to be missing those soccer games, those baseball games, the birthdays. Like Zach said, you're going to be doing birthdays on different days, anniversary, whenever you can. So family's got to be ready. Absolutely.
All right. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's all we got. So thanks for listening. Hopefully that was informative for you guys.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out on anything pre-employment or the academy, and we'll touch on FTO in a future episode and kind of that patrol program training. But for right now, just kind of these few things. If you have any other questions that we didn't touch on, feel free to ask. All right, see you in the next one.